Hello everyone, today I will show you how I climbed to top 500 with Kiriko. You can potentially do the same. I have planned to do a guide for the other heroes I used to get here, so don't worry, those will come. But since Kiriko is the one I play the most, I thought she was a good idea to start with. This isn't a going over the abilities guide, this is a guide focused more on advanced tips for people who already know the basics of Kiriko. Let's start with when to pick Kiriko. Unless you plan to one-trick Kiriko, which is totally fair and quite doable to be honest, the first thing you need to know is when to pick Kiriko, what she's good at and which comps she fits into. First, Kiriko has the ability to cleanse allies, as most should know by now. That means she's the ideal pick against heroes that rely on active negative effects to deal damage, setup, or sustain themselves. That makes her ideal into heroes like Junker Queen, whose bleeding not only damages but heals herself, and you're also able to cleanse the anti-effect from her ult, which again also cuts its healing. Auga, since you can cleanse the burn to deny the extra crit damage, plus the damage over time and over health from his passive, and the invulnerability is almost a full second where Mauga can't deal damage, which is especially strong when Cardiac is active, that is when his screams start shining. And she's able to cleanse both sleep and anti from Ana, which I recommend to always save for nade unless completely necessary, since the cooldown is long enough for Ana to punish with a nade after you waste your suzu on a sleep. Kiriko is also good at countering telegraph burst damage. What do I mean by this? I mean damage or setup abilities with reactable cast times. As examples, she is able to cleanse Echo's bomb reliably, or she can save someone after getting hooked by a roadhog. Mind you, these abilities tend to have a lower cooldown than suzu, so it's important to use it in key situations. If your tank gets hooked and is full HP, maybe it isn't worth wasting a suzu yet, since they could have heroes like Ana behind that will punish you. Secondly, Kiriko has the potentially second highest drain damage in the support role, only behind Zen. Since she has a projectile that is somewhat reliable to hit at range, she's quite good at contesting long range DPS like Ashe or Cassidy. Even if you don't kill them, hitting a few shots can already make them lose position or need to take cover, which is a great advantage and greatly assists your tank to be able to create space safely. For weaknesses, well, she doesn't have an exploitable one to be honest, meaning technically she's playable onto basically any hero, but she's balanced around suzu, meaning that any hero that she can't get with value of suzu isn't ideal. Those are heroes with high uptime in damage and no cleanse all effects, like Zarya, Torv, Moira, etc. Her healing also has a big downtime without Fortune Teller, one of her minor perks, meaning that if for some reason your first burst of ofudas didn't land, your next one won't be available immediately after, and her only healing ability has other uses and a long cooldown. It's also worth mentioning that D.Va is her main counter. She not only can hit both her kunais and ofudas, but also suzu, leaving her with TP as her only defensive option, while D.Va has nothing really worth cleansing. No, D.Va bomb isn't exactly worth it despite being an ultimate. Sorry for interrupting, but remember to like the video and subscribe for more content like this, it helps me a ton. Back to the video. Now, who is Kiriko good with? Let's start with supports. Kiriko is very versatile in terms of playstyles, which I will cover later, but for this section that means that she can cover as both an off and a main support to some extent. She's good with supports like Lucio and Brig since she can provide some good single target healing and damage, while the other two help sustain the team with AoE healing while providing strong offensive or defensive utility as needed, also covering for her lack of a defensive ult. For tanks, she's good with essentially any comp, but Suzu ends up being a must for brawl and dive comps if there is an enemy Ana, since she is the only one who can cleanse nade besides Zarya, which is a major weakness for most brawl tanks. But she naturally blends well with dive heroes since she has good mobility and is pretty self-sufficient. She can also be played in poke, where her damage output becomes more significant while not being extremely weak to dive heroes like a Zenyatta might be. Now, a very important thing to know about Kiriko is to learn how to differentiate her playstyles and when you should apply each. These are not exclusive to each other and you may need to switch up depending on the state of the match. When playing with a hero like Lucio or Brig, who aren't the best at sustaining the tank, you usually want to play near behind the tank, weaving your healing and your damage, while keeping your TP and suzu to either save a teammate that is far away from you, or to cleanse important cooldowns for your tank. You also always want to keep an eye onto what your DPS and other support is doing, since you don't want to just heal the tank non-stop, as there are better supports suited for that and in general isn't an optimal playstyle in Overwatch. You also don't want to stay super far behind, since both her kunais and ofudas are slow traveling projectiles. In the case of your kunais, it will just make them far less reliable, while your ofudas may travel too slowly to save someone if they are far away from you. When you already have a support that is going to do that job like an Ana or Juno, or your tank is a pretty self-sufficient one like Wall, who is not going to need a healer behind all the time, then you should be playing the more DPS flanking Kiriko playstyle. Kiriko has a very strong kit for duels, she has very high damage for a support, a rather small hitbox, and self-build like almost no other support. And of course the best get out of jail card in the game on her TP. She is able to 2-tap any 225 hero or lower, so Mercy, Lucio, Moira, other Kirikos, etc. are great targets to try to kill, while you can always go back to your team if either you or your teammates are in trouble. Similar to the other playstyle, it's still very important that you pay attention to your team positions and what they're doing. If you need to escape, you probably want to do so on a safe position, so it's important to locate where is a safe position and which allies are close to it. At the same time, it's important that when you go for a flank or something like that your team is still applying some pressure, or it will be very hard for you to do anything valuable and you will either die or be forced out. For example, if the enemy tank isn't paying attention to your teammates, you can easily just save whoever you're trying to kill. This can still be valuable sometimes, however, if you're looking to create some space for your team. If the enemy tank is focusing on you, then your team should be able to push and punish him, but again, you still need to pay attention to where your team is and what they're trying to do. Now I'll go over each of her abilities to give some specific tips for each one of them. First, her ofudas and kunais. You can weave some kunais in between your ofudas to maximize value. Now, if you want to prioritize healing, you should ofuda, one kunai, and wait for the next ofuda, as the duration of 2 kunais is longer than the ofuda recovery time. Of course, if you want to maximize damage, which you should do unless your team desperately needs healing, you should ofuda, throw 2 kunai, and ofuda again, and so on. Now, with Fortune Teller, the minor perk I mentioned before, which I will go in further detail later, you're able to heal your teammates while dealing damage, which is especially helpful while weaving, so your healing uptime is much higher, which tends to be one of Kiriko's weaknesses, as I mentioned before, meaning that the damage weaving becomes much stronger as long as you're able to land your shots. Now, on ofuda specifically, you probably know this, but they get destroyed if they get in contact with barriers, walls, or terrain, which means she's terrible at healing allies that are moving around covers, since they will usually end up hitting an obstacle. The solution here is to TP to set teammate, but of course this can be risky. You should be able to tell when you should risk it or not, but this will take time, but it is one of the core aspects of her kit. Well, there isn't much tips to how to wall climb, so this is more of a remember you have a wall climb, which can easily save you against heroes with no vertical mobility if you're out of cooldowns, or well, do not waste your cooldowns unnecessarily. Even I instinctively use my TP to get out when I could just have wall climb my way to safety. It also lets you stall some time for your cooldowns to come up, as the enemy usually doesn't expect immediately for you to start going upwards. For Swift Step, I already mentioned its uses, so I will recommend you have this setting turned on. It allows you to hold your TP to do it as fast as you can, which can save you in a bad situation where you just want to get out. You can just hold the button, do 180, and you will TP to the first ally you encounter. Now, don't over rely on this, as the first ally you encounter can very well be in an even worse situation. Another small tip is that your TP has some few invulnerability frames. That means that when you spawn, you won't receive damage for a fraction of a second. It isn't the best defensive tool in the world, but it can save you from telegraph abilities like Diva Bomb if no ally is behind cover. Lastly, TPing also cleanses yourself, so if you get hit by stuff like an Ana nade, dynamite, etc., Try to use your TP rather than suzu for yourself since it has a much shorter cooldown. The strongest ability on Kiriko's kit and her most prominent value as being the only support who is able to cleanse, except Lifeweaver with the minor perk. A very important thing to know is that it cleanses any negative effects except knockdowns, those being stuff like Rain Shatter, Mauga's Crit Slam, Sigma Rock, etc. So for those abilities, you want to use suzu to prevent your team from getting hit. Talking about preventing, suzu is also not able to prevent or cleanse the effects of Graviton Surge or Gravity Flux, so you should save it for the slam portion of Gravity Flux, which isn't the easiest to time, and when you or whoever got hit by the grab is about to die, or prevent other abilities with long cast times like the ones I mentioned at the beginning. Also, as a small notice, suzu will heal more if it cleanses a negative effect, although it's usually still better to try to prevent abilities if you can, as the extra healing doesn't compensate for most of the damage these abilities do, like an Nade or Ash Dynamite. Lastly, it is important to not underuse suzu. Still a very strong AoE healing plus invulnerability, so using it when one or multiple allies are low is important, even if it may lead to an enemy Ana using a nade after, as there won't be anyone to cleanse if they are already dead. Kitsune is one of the best offensive ults in the game, providing a ton of boost for your team in the area. That being said, the uses of it go beyond just offense. First, it increases attack speed and cooldowns, meaning it also amps healing and utility. It can be especially strong when combined with ultimates like Sojourns, Soldiers, Genjis, etc. But it's also good to combine it with stuff like Brick's ult, since it enables her to be able to stun for up to 4 times in one ult usage, when she normally could only use 2, for example. The applications of it are endless. It's also pretty important to think when you're placing it. It's usually best to be able to cover as much area and angles as possible since it's rather narrow. It can be avoided if used too far behind. Lastly, I wanted to talk about perks. Which perks should you choose? First, it's important to note that this guide is being made at the half of Season 15, and numbers might change. But as of now, I personally believe Fortune Teller to be a stronger perk, generally speaking, unless you suck at landing kunais, which is totally fair if you're just starting with her, and Urgent Care isn't a bad perk at all, but Fortune Teller not only provides more healing, but it does so when you usually aren't able to heal with ofudas, which I will blame in the kit specifics. For major perks, it will depend on your comps. If you have a dive-oriented comp, heroes like Tracer, Doom, Genji, etc., who usually already have mobility, shuffling will let you be able to not only move around more, but especially use your TP on mobile heroes that, well, move around a lot. Why? Well, like I said, hero ofudas break if they hit a target. With shuffling, you're able to TP to someone, heal them, and then reposition to an ally on a safer spot. On the other hand, Foxtrot can provide a movement option for shorter range, slower and less mobile tanks like Zarya, Junker Queen, or Hog. The extra mobility is key for them to either get away or get close to the enemy quickly, and you usually shouldn't need the extra TPs to go in and out safely, as they don't have sudden bursts of movements, besides maybe stuff like Junker Queen's ult. That's all, everyone. Tell me if you think I missed anything. I read in the comments. See you on the next video.